Welcome to The Debate. Today we are diving into, a really significant shift in Canadian energy policy. British Columbia's new, aggressive, but also very specific structure for promoting residential solar adoption starting in 2025.
It's definitely a big change, especially, following the end of the federal Greener Homes program.
Absolutely. And the central question we're grappling with today is, I think, pretty critical. Does this combination, the provincial rebate, the sales tax exemption, and the 0% financing, does it genuinely create an optimal, straightforward, and importantly, widely accessible path for people to adopt solar? Or are there complex structural limitations, maybe some exclusions that actually undermine its overall effectiveness? Now, I have to say, I'm quite enthusiastic about this new BC Hydro Stack. I really believe this $10,000 potential incentive system is a superior financial tool. It makes solar a clear, almost immediate win for eligible customers.
Okay, I appreciate the enthusiasm, I do. But I think we need to maybe temper that just a little with a dose of reality. While those headline figures, $10,000, they sound impressive, I'm taking the position that this program actually contains pretty significant structural limitations, and some key exclusions too, that make it far less universal than it might seem. And in some ways, it actually encourages, let's say, less than efficient system designs.
But see, the financial architecture is where the genius lies, I think. That's where we see the potential for real mass adoption. We are stacking three incredibly powerful incentives that work together. First, you've got the potential, like we said, for a $10,000 combined rebate. That's up to $5,000 for the panels and up to $5,000 for the mandatory battery storage. Second, you get that automatic 7% PST exemption, provincial sales tax, on all the equipment. That's automatic. And third, and this is really crucial, is the 15-year 0% interest financing offered through the approved installers. Now, this combination, it completely transforms the proposal, right? The goal, straight out of the material, is to essentially take that high upfront cost off the table and make the new monthly loan payment less than the old hydro bill. It's designed to be cash flow positive, potentially from day one. I mean, that example they give is so compelling. A $292 monthly hydro bill gets swapped for a combined loan and remaining bill payment of only $209. That's $83 saved every month, right away. That feels like real accessibility to me.
Well, that financial calculation only works if you're allowed to participate in the first place. And that, right there, is the first major structural limitation we absolutely have to address. This program is exclusively reserved for BC Hydro customers only. FortisBC customers, people in cities with their own municipal utilities like Nelson Hydro, they are completely, totally excluded from that core $10,000 rebate. We're talking about huge geographic areas here that only get, the PST exemption and net metering. So how can we really call this an accessible pathway when a really significant portion of the province is just locked out from the main incentive?
Okay, I see why you raise the exclusion as a major point, and it is a limitation, geographically speaking. But I think the province is likely focusing its fiscal energy, its resources, on infrastructure it directly controls, BC Hydro's grid. This lets them tie the incentives directly to grid reliability objectives and, maybe more importantly, mandate specific technologies, like that battery component we mentioned, which probably wouldn't be feasible across all the different service areas. So the incentive is massive, yes, but precisely because it's targeted where the province feels it can manage the entire outcome, from installation to grid impact.
Okay, let's look at that targeting then, because I think it introduces what you might call a perverse incentive. I really have to challenge the design of the solar rebate tap itself. Why cap the solar portion at $5,000? That's a limit you hit when you install just a 5 kilowatt system. Now, the material you shared clearly shows that a large home, what they call the max power user, might actually need a 12 kilowatt system to truly offset their usage, maybe 16,000 kilowatt hours a year or more. Yet, they get the exact same $10,000 total rebate as someone who only puts in a 5 kilowatt system. So this structure, it creates this kind of financial sweet spot, doesn't it? Where homeowners with high usage are actually discouraged from installing the capacity they really need. Because the payback period on those extra 7 kilowatts, it becomes much, much longer without any matching rebate money.
That's an interesting point on the marginal return for the largest users. And I grant you that, yes, the payback definitely diminishes, probably quite quickly, above that 5 kilowatt solar threshold. However, I'd frame it a bit differently. I see the cap as a mechanism for maximizing the, let's say, efficient dispersal of provincial funds. It's targeting the average user, the typical household, who sees the most significant immediate financial benefit from that 5 kilowatt system paired with the battery. The goal probably isn't to fully subsidize every massive home's total energy independence. It's more likely to maximize the adoption of that specific 5 kilowatt solar, 10 kilowatt hour battery system configuration, the one that dramatically reduces a typical family's bill and provides that resilience piece. And remember, the solar rebate is also capped at 50% of the project cost. That ensures responsible funding, right?
It prevents just dumping public money into systems that are maybe disproportionately large or gold-plated.
Okay, if the goal is efficiency, then let's scrutinize that mandatory battery requirement. You're asking homeowners to take on the, frankly, significant cost and complexity of installing a battery system, even with the $5,000 battery rebate factored in, when BC Hydro already offers what they themselves call full retail credit net metering. They credit excess power you send to the grid at the full retail rate, around 15 cents per kilowatt hour currently, and they even pay out any surplus you have at the end of the year. So I'm sorry, but I just don't quite buy that the battery component is financially necessary when the utility grid itself is already acting as a pretty high-value virtual battery, essentially for free.
That's a compelling argument against the battery purely on grid export value, I'll give you that. But have you considered the 3 key reasons the battery is likely being pushed so hard beyond just making the rebate number bigger? First, yes, as you acknowledged, the $5,000 battery-specific rebate makes the technology much more affordable, offsetting a good chunk of your cost concern. Second, and this is huge for many people, it provides absolutely essential backup power, energy resilience. A plain solar-only system, as you know, shuts down immediately when the grid fails. That's a safety requirement. The solar plus battery combo keeps critical things running during an outage. That's a non-negotiable feature for a lot of homeowners, especially outside major urban centers. And third, it enables optimization through automatic self-consumption. This means the system prioritizes using every valuable kilowatt hour the homeowner generates themselves, storing excess during the day to use at night, rather than selling it back sometimes relatively cheaply, and then immediately having to buy power back from the grid later at the full retail price. It optimizes their personal financial gain and usage. It ensures they capture every bit of value from the photons hitting their roof.
Right, that resilience aspect is valid, but it brings us directly to the question of funding accessibility overall. The federal Greener Homes Grant, which, let's remember, was a direct upfront cash injection of up to $5,000, actual money in hand. That's gone now. And we've replaced that guaranteed cash handout with a reliance on installer-offered, credit-dependent 0% financing. So the question is relying on a homeowner successfully passing a commercial credit approval for a 15-year loan really better or more accessible than a government grant that just gave them the money up front? To me, this replaces broad accessibility with creditworthiness as perhaps the primary barrier to entry now.
I'm not convinced that focusing solely on the credit check actually reflects the opportunity here. Yes, the federal grant is gone and the federal loan program also closed, but the fundamental problem of high upfront costs for solar, it remains. This 15-year 0% financing, I see it as the necessary enabler in the current market. It's the structure that's required to effectively leverage that massive $10,000 provincial rebate. I mean, think about it. If we didn't have the 0% option, most customers, even those with excellent credit, might still balk at the final net price tag after the rebate. It could still be, $15,000, $20,000 or more? This financing structure, it's the primary tool designed specifically to keep the monthly payment obligation lower than the original hydro bill. And that is the singular driver, I believe, for achieving broad-based adoption among those who qualify.
But the process itself adds friction, doesn't it? The material mentions a 3 to 6 month paperwork process, the mandatory pre-approval before you can even install anything, and then the credit check you mentioned. If you fail that credit check for whatever reason, then that $10,000 rebate might as well not exist for you because the remaining cost is suddenly completely unmanageable without that 0% financing lever.
Conversely, though, the potential reward here is so immense, saving potentially thousands over the system's life, plus the resilience that navigating that process becomes, for many, justifiable. It's positioned as a targeted, high-value exchange. Endure a few months of paperwork and checks for potentially a decade and a half of subsidized, cleaner energy. So to summarize my position, for the admittedly large segment of the population served by BC Hydro, this 2025 stack of incentives, the $10,000 combined potential rebate, the PST exemption, and crucially, the 0% financing, it presents a really undeniable, robust opportunity. I think this policy combination delivers significant potential monthly savings and, very importantly, establishes energy resilience, which was a feature largely, let's say, ignored or unaddressed under the old federal programs.
And my position remains that the apparent simplicity of just saying $10,000 rebate really hides some significant structural complexities and, yes, severe exclusions. Potential users absolutely must fully understand the lengthy process involved. They need to know upfront that only BC Hydro customers qualify for the major funding, and they need to grasp how that rebate cap effectively dictates the financially smartest system size, which, as we discussed, often falls short of the actual power needs of larger homes. Accessibility is therefore undeniably limited by both your utility service area and your creditworthiness.
Well, it's certainly clear that the material we've discussed today presents a major and really fascinating shift toward provincially driven incentives and the specific financing tools. It definitely requires anyone considering solar adoption in BC now to undertake some careful review of their own situation.
Indeed, a very clear understanding of all the specific eligibility rules, the mandatory pre-approval step, the utility exclusion factor, and that 50% project cost cap on the rebate. It's absolutely essential for anyone trying to navigate the current landscape of solar energy adoption in British Columbia. Lots to consider.